radio. In microwaves, you're oscillating 1 billion times per second. And by the time you get into infrared, you're at 1 trillion times per second. So when we get into the visible light spectrum, we're operating and oscillating at numbers that are so high in frequency. So what's happening as this frequency increases is, again, the force of gravity becomes so strong that any mass that becomes in contact with that frequency, photons or even solid mass, the frequency of that mass becomes so high that the mass becomes, in essence, lighter. In other words, it doesn't have that sort of feeling of weight to it, the feeling of mass. So it starts to accelerate. So this is starting to tell us what's happening in a black hole in the center of our galaxy. If we look at a black hole, first of all, it appears black. And most scientists think that it's just a tremendous force of gravity in the center of the black hole. And they're right. But what this theory shows is there's something else happening in a black hole. We're seeing oscillations per second going so fast, and that matter, mass, photons, are actually starting to come in contact with this field. And at this point, which is known as the event horizon in a black hole, matter is accelerating beyond the speed of light. And if matter accelerates beyond the speed of light, and we view the universe, we take pictures with cameras, but when we look at a black hole, you can't see anything because it's oscillating faster than the wavelengths with which we see light with our brains. So we get a void. A picture of a black hole shows it to be black because it's oscillating too fast. It's going beyond the speed of light, so therefore it just appears black. If really we had cameras and wavelengths in our brain capable of seeing into higher frequencies and energies, a black hole would actually be luminous. It would just be a greater increase of energy, according to this theory. So as we get smaller and smaller and smaller in the orbits, the oscillations per second start to go into numbers that the highest number ever counted is a Google. A number per second that we can't even imagine. So at that point, if we could make a spacecraft that could oscillate with energy vibrations anywhere near this point, we would see that spacecraft be capable of producing energies that could allow it to conquer the speeds of light. So what does all this have to do with the UFOs? What does this have to do with the UFOs in this investigation? Well, it wasn't going to be clear to me until a month later, after I had this discovery, that I actually took pictures of the waves that were pulsating off of the UFOs in the STS-75 tether incident. I actually slowed the video down frame by frame, and I took pictures off a TV monitor to actually look at the waves themselves. I really had no idea what I was going to find. But before we go to there, I'm going to explain a few more things about the gravity beyond light speed theory and how this model is not only showing us what's happening in our galaxy, but also is showing what's happening in our microuniverse. In theory, this is just a theory. It's a theory on paper. It would have to be demonstrated and proven to be correct. One experiment done by a physicist named Dr. Randall Mills at a company called Blacklight Power. If we go into the microuniverse, assuming that on my galaxy clock here, the distances I'm using, the size of this clock is about 6 million miles across, which is not actually that large in comparison to even our solar system. If this was Earth here and the Sun is 93 million miles away, we can see if this is 6 million miles, it's not that big of an amount of space to be having these orbits moving through. But assuming we're getting way into here, and this is the size of an atom, and this is the proton in the middle of the atom, and these orbits here are layers in which an electron orbits around the proton. The hydrogen atom has one proton and one electron. And we all know that hydrogen is a source of fuel and is a source of energy. Dr. Randall Mills took, using a chemical process, actually shortened the distance between an electron's orbit in a hydrogen atom. In other words, if an electron was orbiting here, he caused it to jump to, say, here. What would happen if we could change the orbit of an electron from here to the energy in a hydrogen atom? According to this theory, the answer is obvious. If the electron jumped from here to here, you would see an increase in the frequency of the oscillation of the electron around the proton. Here, if we go into an innermost wheel, if we move into a closer wheel to the center of the proton, you would see an increase in the oscillation of the electron around the proton, and therefore an increase of energy. Well, in Randall-Mills experiments, once he shortened the distance between the electron's orbit around the proton, that's exactly what happened. The hydrogen atoms started to produce more energy in the form of actual heat.
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de Evidencia, el caso de la NASA y los OVNIs.
And in the form of actual energy waves. Although Randall-Mills doesn't have this same explanation, when I applied his experiment to the galaxy clock, I saw that it fit in perfectly. So even on a micro level, in the micro universe, we can see the same thing happening. An increase in oscillations represents an increase in energy. So now, I'm going to explain a little bit about going into this process of how electromagnetism increases as oscillations in electric fields increase. We're going to look at a little bit of a different diagram. The evidence of magnetism increasing as oscillations of photons, which are just electromagnetic waves, can be demonstrated in part by the properties of an electromagnet. If we take a conductor rod such as copper or steel, and we wrap windings of copper wire around the conductor and run an electric current through the wire, the conductor rod turns into a magnet. This is because as electromagnetism through the wire oscillates around a nucleus, the conductor rod, energy in the form of magnetism, gravity, is produced in the vortex. The energy in the form of magnetism produced is relative to the frequency with which the current oscillates through the wire around the conductor. As the number of windings of wire increase around the metal conductor rod, with the same constant speed flow of energy moving through the wire, the energy in the form of magnetism gravity increases. This is part of what is happening in the galaxy clock. As photons of light waves oscillate into smaller and smaller orbits, the energy produced in the vortex in the form of magnetism gravity is increasing. But in the galaxy clock, electromagnetism moving at the speed of light as a constant can move into infinitely smaller and smaller orbits into the microcosm even, and the frequency of oscillations per second can also increase towards infinity. Thus, magnetism gravity is also going to increase towards infinity. Mesmerized by the amazing pulsing waves from the STS-75 tether incident UFOs, I decided to take a look at the waves frame by frame. I felt they might reveal the propulsion system of these giant UFOs. I once asked Dr. Glenn Seaborg, who shared the Nobel Prize with Macmillan for the discovery of plutonium, former chair of the Atomic Energy Commission under Presidents Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, authorizing all of the nuclear weapons testing at the Nevada test site, about anti-gravity generators being developed by alternative energy developers. He answered me and said, if anyone could build a gravity generator, they would have an energy source far beyond nuclear fusion, and I don't believe anyone is doing anything like that yet. On a huge TV screen with a flawless S-video VCR, and with the help of Steve Oakland, an amazing zero-point energy scientist, we identified and freeze-framed the first pulse of the UFO as it was passing over the top of the 12-mile-long tether. We were both astounded and in such awe I could barely speak. It was a profound moment in this investigation. We were looking at what appeared to be a gravity wave with a steep spiral radiating from the UFO right out of the Phase 2 galaxy clock. It was the clear signature of a powerful gravity wave that was clearly bending light into the shape of the incredible magnitude of the wave. The wave radiated right out of the black hole in the center of the UFO, and we could see clearly that by the extreme steepness of the wave coming out of the black hole, that the hole was the point where gravity produced in the UFO's propulsion system was faster than light. And because our eyes and cameras could not produce a signal that fast, it appeared black as the mystery that beckoned me with the knowing that the UFOs were capable of utilizing such high-frequency gravity waves that they could conquer the speed of light and visit us from another star system. The Phase 2 pulse was equally astounding because it showed an outward pulsing ring, another phenomenon that happened in the galaxy clock when each inner ring completed an oscillation. It produced an outward moving wave, and as all the rings in the galaxy clock completed their oscillations, the wave would radiate out to the periphery of the clock. But this was also telling me that the extreme high-frequency magnetism gravity produced in the center of the UFO's gravity generator was being distributed throughout its mass. There had to be a reason for this, I thought, but was this the UFO's propulsion system? The Phase 3 pulse was showing the ring moving back towards the center, as if to see the galaxy clock moving in the opposite direction. Perhaps they alternated their pulses in time forward with time reverse, and there was some reason for doing this. Perhaps this prevented the high-frequency pulsing energy from dissipating and keeping the mass of the UFO in a high-frequency wave state. I really believe that the answer to our future space program was staring at us with a clear signature from a most profoundly advanced extraterrestrial civilization. But who were they? The answer would take more time. I sent the photographs of the three-phase pulse to Dr. Newth and wrote the following letter on January 22nd, 2000. Dear Dr. Newth, I just wanted to see if you received the photos from the NASA video I sent you. Also, have you seen the videotape yet? What do you think of the pulsing waves of light in their particular formations? Dr. Newth wrote me back the following letter on February 22nd, 2000. Dear Mr. Sereda, yes, I received your photographs and they are indeed quite peculiar. However, at least in the photographs, I have seen nothing that cannot be explained as floating debris illuminated through sharp shadows in the shuttle bay. Maybe the videotape shows different things. I will try to see the tape soon. Signed, Joe Newth. In the year 2000, I read on the cover of an old issue of Discover magazine from August of 1998, Was Einstein Wrong? News broke that a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, Dr. Raymond Chow, had caused photons to do 1.7 times the speed of light. Dr. Chow did an amazing experiment using atomic clocks to measure the speed at which photons travel through normal space at the speed of light, and next to this, he ran photons through a quartz glass barrier, and they actually tunneled, he said, through the barrier at an astounding 1.7 times the speed of light. When I read the words tunneling photons, I applied them to my galaxy clock, and the answer as to why the photons passed through the quartz glass faster than photons that didn't was so obvious. The tunneling photons, which were just electromagnetic waves by my new theory, tunneled in such microscopic orbits that the magnetism gravity produced in the vortex produced more energy than required for photons to do light speed. When the magnetism gravity signal got too powerful, the photons increased in energy frequency, thus they became even more energized and lighter than they already are, and they broke the speed of light. The implications towards understanding this are astounding. Because the energy required for photons to move at the speed of light is a fixed number, and we can now see in the galaxy clock that gravity is increasing towards infinity, the magnetism gravity will eventually conquer the point where the energy of gravity will be greater than that needed for photons to move at the speed of light. At this point, where oscillations of waves per second are so high, the energy gravity produced in the vortex will cause photons to move faster than the speed of light. Increase in oscillations of photons, light waves, causes an increase in magnetism gravity. At the center of a galaxy is a black hole, where the oscillations of electromagnetic second grow towards the infinity of smaller and smaller orbiting photons, and and the electromagnetic waves. The smaller and smaller orbiting photons are producing greater and greater increases in gravity at the center of the black hole. When any mass comes in contact with higher and higher frequency...
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de Evidencia, el caso de la NASA y los OVNIs.
Gravity becomes lighter and lighter, easily glides towards the speed of light and far beyond. By this new theory, a black hole's event horizon is the point where photons and mass become so light, and with such highly quantized electromagnetic energy, they glide faster than the speed of light. The event horizon merely appears black just because as photons and mass are accelerating beyond light speed, and we cannot see anything moving that fast, the signal appears void because we can only see events in what I now call relative light speed time. Canadian scientist John Hutchison is the discoverer of what is now known as the Hutchison effect. I met with him in the year 2001 to learn about his work and to show him the galaxy clock and gravity beyond light speed theory. His work demonstrated the principle perfectly. He was the first scientist to change the frequency of mass from a low 7 to 8 Hertz wave state to a higher frequency. He did this in an amazing experiment where he bombarded a 75-pound cannonball with high-frequency waves produced by Tesla coils, radio Van de Graaff waves. As the 75-pound ball absorbed the high-frequency magnetic waves, its mass became lighter, and so light that it actually started to levitate. If we can change the frequency of mass into a high-frequency wave state, it can eventually turn into a form so light that the energy required for propulsion for a spacecraft would reduce or become more efficient and allow us to experience less and less inertia, therefore experience less g-force in spaceflight. If mass could become so light that it became as light as a photon, mass or space could attain the speed of light with very little energy in the form of actual propulsion. If mass or spacecraft could transform into such a high-frequency wave state that it went far beyond the frequency of waves in the visible light spectrum, mass or spacecraft could become invisible. Higher yet, mass or spacecraft could break the speed of light. Now it was very clear to me how the UFOs were traveling beyond light speed. They were pulsing their spacecraft with such high-frequency waves of energy that the spacecraft reduced its mass to the point that it became so light, lighter than a photon, and when mass becomes that light, it takes so little energy for it to move at the speed of light and beyond. The answer to how we could propel ourselves to the stars was being transmitted to us in the form of a gravity beyond light speed energy wave, the very signature to how a spacecraft could break the speed of light and visit us from outside our own solar system and possibly from one of our nearest stars. In 1996, just after the STS-75 tether, NASA opened the Breakthrough Propulsion Physics Lab, a new project at NASA designed to look at advanced concepts in space energy and propulsion, even beyond light speed theories. Was it a coincidence? In 1998, Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz, an American physicist who heads the NASA Advanced Space Propulsion Lab near Houston, Texas, an astronaut on board the Space Shuttle STS-75 Tether Incident mission, suddenly developed a new type of propulsion rocket drive system for NASA. Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz had invented a revolutionary type of rocket engine that utilizes high-energy, pulsed electromagnetic waves called the Variable Specific Impulse Magnetoplasma Rocket. The key words were pulsed and electromagnetic waves. Did Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz see something on STS-75, the same UFOs we are seeing on the video today? Was he trying to reverse engineer the kind of physics that he thought he was seeing radiating from the UFOs? You're about to see what we call the interdimensional shift sequence. It's an amazing sequence because it shows something actually moving from one dimension into another. A UFO that appears to just suddenly come from nowhere, as if from another dimension. But now we have a little bit of an idea of what that actually means. You're going to see the curvature of the Earth down here, and you're going to see a lot of lightning flashes on the ground here. And then you're going to see a brightly glowing object kind of moving very slowly into frame here, and then it kind of just stops around here. And there'll be a lot of what appear to be, again, what NASA will try to tell us are shooting stars or meteorites streaking by, some of them actually leaving the Earth, and then see things coming straight in and disappearing into the clouds. It's really a powerful scene. But watch up here. At about this point in the screen, keep your eyes focused there, because all of a sudden, out of the black void of space, above the Earth, a disk with the familiar shape just suddenly, out of nowhere, just appears. How did this happen? The space shuttle's actual cameras, the black and white cameras that we're looking at, can see into the near ultraviolet, a frequency of light that humans can't see because it's too high in energy. We know that if the UFO is actually mass vibrating in a high frequency wave state, all that the UFO has to do is go into a higher level of energy, and it can simply suddenly disappear. But in reverse, if the UFO were actually already in a higher frequency than the cameras could detect, somewhere up in the far ultraviolet or the X-ray or gamma ray spectrum, all it has to do is slow its energy down to that equal to the energy levels of the near ultraviolet or the visible light, and suddenly the UFO would appear. I remember in 1968 when I saw the first and only daylight UFO I'd ever seen. For over half an hour I watched with hundreds of people in amazement in Berkeley, California in 1968, looking up into the sky, and we watched this disk, this incredibly visible metallic disk, just hover there, and all of a sudden blinking out and disappearing in a matter of a second. It didn't accelerate and go somewhere else, it actually just disappeared. So essentially the UFO I saw in 1968 did the same thing, but in reverse of what you're seeing here. This UFO is doing the opposite. It's slowing down energy and suddenly just appears in our dimension, and all of a sudden it just kind of drifts by, and you'll see a lot of other exciting things in this part of the video. As the space shuttle was moving in a prograde orbit around the Earth at 18,000 miles per hour, seen moving from right to left, we can now see a large, disc-shaped, unidentified flying object accelerating from the lower right beyond the speed of the space shuttle. Now the object slows down and appears to be hovering, an illusion caused as it flies at the same speed as the shuttle, as if following it, an impossible feat for a natural object. Lightning flashes down on the ground and objects moving in all sorts of different directions down below. And now an object streaks by at amazing speed, far faster than the speed of any meteorite or shooting star or known manned spacecraft. Now in the center of the screen, we can see an unidentified flying object suddenly appearing, giving off a tremendous luminosity as it appears to be moving from the higher dimension of energies into a dimension where the visible wavelengths of the camera could observe its light. As we now understand the electromagnetic spectrum, and that the human eyes can only see the visible light spectrum, when an unidentified flying object moves from an energy dimension into our visibility, it is clearly changing frequency of its entire mass from a purely quantized energy state and lowering it to a level of energy where we can actually observe it. This demonstrates that the UFOs are capable of altering the frequency of their mass and the...
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de Evidencia, el caso de la NASA y los OVNIs.
Craft from solid mass into pure energy and light, and thus can attain the speed of light. The ancient megalithic ruin Stonehenge, believed to be constructed by the ancient Druids in approximately 2900 BC, embraces the midsummer sunrise and beckons the stars above on Salisbury Plain, near Wiltshire in southern England. Many astronomers believed it was an ancient clock to the sun, moon, and the stars, with precise alignment patterns that continue to mystify scientists today. Was our ancient past about to reveal a mystery so great that it would wait until we realized that our very own future was inside of our past? Across from Stonehenge in a farmer's field in 1996, the same year as the NASA STS-75 tether incident, a crop circle appeared with the identical message of the gravity wave pulsating from the UFO. It was a crop circle with the nearly exact same degree of a spiraling wave curvature, even with the hole in the center, just as the NASA STS-75 pulsing UFO revealed. Were intelligent beings trying to send us a message so clear and with such regularity that it was intended for us to decode? Was the message the secret to their propulsion systems and a gravity generator energy source capable of solving our environmental energy pollution crisis? In 1938, a Chinese and Tibetan team of archaeologists, led by Chinese professor Chai Pu-Tei from the University of Beijing, discovered an astounding burial site high in the mountains of Bayan Kara Ula on the border of Tibet and China. The Chinese-Tibetan team found a gravesite containing the skeletal remains of what appeared to be tiny people with large bulbous heads. The team found that the cave area is still inhabited by two tribes that have some of the same physical attributes. They are frail in their bodies and stand between 3'6" and 4'7", with an average height of 4'2". The two tribes are known today as the Hans and the Zopas. But then the research team found evidence of an extraterrestrial origin. They found a series of large stone, round discs in the burial caves. The discs were round, had a square notch cut out of the side, with a hole in the middle, and a spiraling groove of ancient written characters spiraling out from the center that would be later translated by a Chinese scientist named Dr. Sum Nui in 1962. In 1965, 716 more grooved Dropa stone discs were discovered in the same burial caves. The researchers were told by the local tribespeople that the stone discs marked an event that happened some 12,000 years ago. When we compare this amazing NASA UFO photo to the Dropa stone discs, we can see an astounding perfect match. We can see a disc-shaped UFO, a black hole in the center, the square notch cut out of the side, and a spiraling wave radiating out from the center of the disc to the rim, all identical to the 12,000-year-old Dropa stones. Could this be the very signature that an ancient civilization wanted us to see? Could these ancient peoples of China and Tibet have recorded an event 12,000 years ago describing UFOs right down to a magnetic, pulsing wave of energy? In the the early 1960s, Professor Sum Amnui broke the code of the characters written in the tiny writing of the spiraling groove of the Dropa stone. Eventually, the translation of the disc was published. The translation revealed that some 12,000 years ago, a spacecraft from another planet had crash landed